Hello again, Gooners. It's the loose cannon number whatever. I don't know. I don't count these things. Or I do when I finally put the kind of whatever you call it. What is it? It's like a test card. It's kind of like that, right? And it says the loose cannon and it's got a number. So by then you'll know exactly what number episode it is. If we can call them episodes. Anyway, I'm delaying too much and I should get real, get with it, and start talking about what's important. And what is important at the moment, being it's the silly season, of course, transfers. Transfers? What are transfers? Do they apply to this club? This club? The one up there? Do they? Well, so far, not really. We're talking teenagers. Yes, in that sense, yes, Arsenal have been not that busy, but they've been doing a bit of business. In terms of the other transfers, nothing's been happening. Well, nothing, nothing much has it. So that's why probably I'm feeling a bit tired of saying the same thing. But it's slightly different. I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about. The Vietnam friendly, a little bit about that. Simon Mignolet, the latest on him. Gervinho, bit of talk about him leaving. Vito Mannone, same goes for him. Victor Valdez, what's the situation? I shall tell you shortly. Julio Cesar of QPR, I'll tell you about what's going on with him. Then there's a big exodus of players. That's coming up. Also, I will read briefly from Viv Addison's autobiography. Read from it last time. Aside from that, I think I'll just get on with the main news today, of course, was Peter Hill-Wood stepped down from his position as chairman. How do I feel about that, you ask me? I'm glad you asked. I don't really feel that sad. I'm trying to put it in the most diplomatic way I can. Yeah, I don't really feel too sad about it. I think, of course, I didn't wish any ill health on Peter Hill-Wood, and Arsenal runs in his blood, you could say. But I think it's been an embarrassment for a few years. That didn't sound diplomatic, but I think he has really. I'm, of course, as I said before, I don't wish any ill on anyone who likes Arsenal or loves Arsenal as he claims to do, and I wouldn't dispute that. I'm not that stupid, but but I think he's embarrassed us at times with some of the remarks he's come out with, like I have an honourable agreement with Barcelona that Cesc will not leave. And next thing, he's a Barcelona player. Then he said something about Schwarzer, that we were going to get him, and that didn't happen. So whatever he says is going to happen never did. So I think it was about time he stepped down. And I don't know if he stepped down under pressure from anybody, or if he says he's quoting health reasons as the main reason why he did step down. So I'm going to take him at his word. I think he probably is a man of his word. Obviously, he's very much one of those people that get Arsenal called the Bank of England club, and the same could go for his successor, Sir Chips Keswick. What a name that is, Sir Chips Keswick. Well, we can't knock it. He's got a knighthood, and I wish him all the best in his new role. And hopefully, he's not a lot younger than Peter Hill-Wood, but hopefully he will make a few less mistakes, because somebody said to me Peter Hill-Wood's kind of like Prince Philip. Prince Philip obviously has said a few outrageous things, got away with it, a bit like Peter Hill-Wood. Anyway, enough about him. I don't want to say any more about him other than that. Yes, he's obviously done a good job at some point, hasn't he? He must have done. It's just that people like me perhaps don't appreciate him enough. So if that's the case, I'm very sorry. If not, then I'm glad I'm right. Okay, enough about that. What about new signings? Well, I can tell you, according to which website was it? George Bird's website, which is about youth players, we have signed a Sweden international. Wow, don't get too excited. He's only 16 years of age. His name is Jamal Raga. He's, yeah, as I said, 16. He's a striker. He's a direct replacement for Jordan Brown, who has left to join West Ham. And I didn't see Jordan Brown play, so I'm not too sure what he's replacing. Dan Crowley has arrived from Aston Villa. That was a little while ago, but I thought I'd mention it because I haven't done before. He's an England under-17, but I have heard of his name, so he must be pretty good. I think I saw him. I think I saw him in the highlights on the Arsenal channel, whatever it's called, Arsenal Player. I think I saw him. Because the name definitely rings a bell, and he really played. I was so shocked when we lost. I think it was a huge scoreline, like 6-1. We lost to Aston Villa's youngsters, and now we've got one of their best players, Dan Crowley, number 10. who is also an England under-17 international. Although, having seen the England under-21 internationals, you wonder how good you've got to be an England international nowadays. Another player that we haven't yet signed but are about to, according to George Bird, is Julio. This is why I'm not so sure I want us to sign him, because it's a long name. Julio Pleguezelo Selva. Well, let's just call him Selva for now. Defensive player, defender from Barcelona, and that's where I think we should do most of our shopping. Why not bring Cesc Fabregas back? Well, it doesn't look like he's going to leave, judging by what he's saying lately. He says nobody knows how he feels, but the good news is, or is it good news? But there is news, or reports or rumours. Maybe I should stick with rumours. There are rumours that he has got a child living in London. His girlfriend apparently has given birth to a child, and he may well want to come back to London to see his child grow up. His daughter, apparently, according to some website. I can't remember the name. Very sorry about that. But I don't know if that's true or not. So if anybody out there does and they're sure about it, do let us know. Meanwhile, players that could come in, of course, Simon Mignolet, excellent Sunderland goalkeeper. £9 million is the asking price, apparently. He's not going to sign a new deal at Sunderland, so they might as well let him go. It looks to me like Paolo Di Canio may well mess things up at Sunderland, judging by some of the comments that certain players have made. I'm just going by what I'm reading in the papers, so just judging by that, I just think it may well go. I mean, I know he had pretty good impact initially, but I wonder what's going to happen at Sunderland. I really fear for them, because they're a nice club. I've been up to the Stadium of Light, very friendly people. Got a lot of time for Sunderland, so I hope they don't go down next season, but I fear the worst, unfortunately. Anyway, who else coming in? There's been talk about Julio Cesar of QPR coming in. There's been that much talk about it. Still hasn't happened, but there's been that much talk. The bookies have now decided they're not going to take bets on the possibility that Cesar will be an Arsenal player for next season. So that sounds quite likely, but then sometimes these bookies do that as a publicity stunt. So let's not get too carried away about that. Victor Valdez will not be an Arsenal player. He's staying at Barcelona for one more year, then he will leave on a free transfer. By which time, perhaps, we won't need a goalkeeper. Who knows? Vito Mannone is on the way to Cagliari, some people are saying. I don't think it's a done deal yet, but don't be surprised if it does happen. Nicholas Bentner's quite a funny case in point. It's not on my list, but he reckons how many clubs are interested? 6 clubs. He started naming some of those clubs, one of them being Borussia Mönchengladbach. Now, they've come out and said they're not interested in him. So it makes you wonder where he will end up. He's now setting his sights a little bit lower than he was. Initially, he was saying he wants to join a top club. Now he's saying it doesn't have to be a top club, just a team that I can play for. Anyway, I wish Nicholas Bentner the best, because I think he's a good striker, but he just needs to keep his head on his shoulders where it scores a lot of goals. Gervinho could be on the way to Marseille on a loan basis. Marseille have expressed an interest. I could see that one happening, because if we could get him off the wage bill, it might not be a bad thing at all. Especially if we could bring a player in from Marseille. There's been talk about, I've got the guy's name, Ayew. Well, he's a striker at Marseille. He could possibly come in, according to one source, which I don't really trust very much. So my view on that is no, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think Gervinho will leave, but we won't get anybody coming back in the opposite direction. So yeah, what else is there to discuss? Oh, other players leaving. Sanchez Watt, he's already gone. Connor Henderson, what a great left foot he's got. Well, he's gone, unfortunately, as is Junaid Mead. He's obviously a small fullback. I think all 3 of those, they should have decent careers in the Championship. James Shea, goalkeeper, I'm quite surprised he's gone, but I'm sure he's going to find a decent club. Certainly at Championship level, at minimum, I would say. Reece Charles Cook, he looks a good goalkeeper when I've seen him. Seen him live a couple of times. Thought he was a decent goalkeeper. So again, he should find a club easy enough. And the following players have already found clubs. That's Martin Angher, who I had a lot of time for him. He's at Nuremberg now. Kyle Embacilio, now he's gone back to Holland to join FC Twente. And Craig Eastman is now at Colchester. So it's all movement at the moment. Movement on prices as well in Vietnam, which is why that friendly against against Vietnam could be in jeopardy. Stadium fees are the stumbling block. So don't be surprised if that doesn't happen. It was obviously disappointing when the club pulled out of the Japan tour a couple of years ago. I was very disappointed about that. But yeah, that's all the news. I'm now going to move on to Viv Anderson's First Among Unequals, his biography. And well, what did I read about last time? Oh yeah, when Brian Clough accepted that Viv Anderson was leaving to join Don Howe at Arsenal. And so I will continue where I left off last time. The first thing I noticed that was different at Arsenal, he says, skipping quite a few pages because there are suddenly a lot of pictures, was the feel of Highbury when you walked through the doors. It wasn't just the famous marble halls. You could taste the atmosphere of tradition and success in every corner. As I came to understand, this could sometimes weigh heavily on the players. In Arsenal's case, whatever you did tended to be compared to the exploits of the double-winning team of 1971. Before that, I'm told, it was the team of the 1930s, but only Don Howe could remember that far back. Of course, now we've got all those years of the times when we've actually won trophies, and it is starting to look embarrassing that it's been such a long time. So that may weigh heavily on the players' shoulders also. Now, admittedly, the double-winning team were brilliant, but it seemed to me that many at the club just couldn't let it go. To them, nothing could ever be as good as that. I think this negative attitude finally began to change after George Graham's championship winning campaigns in 89 and 91, but was only finally laid to rest in the Arsene Wenger era. If Highbury, with its unique atmosphere, was the first difference I noticed, the main change from what I had been used to was Don Howe's training methods. Under Clough, training, especially during the season, was minimal, with lots of walks and a few five-a-sides. Don Howe was more mainstream. We went for hard runs, trained with weights, and were strictly monitored all the time. Luckily for me, I'd been exposed to some of this way of doing things with England. Don Howe was the number 2 to both Ron Greenwood and Bobby Robson, so I thought I had a good idea of what to expect. Believe me, it was hard. For someone like me, who was not the greatest trainer unless it was ball work, training under the Don was especially difficult. On my first day at Arsenal for pre-season training, Howe sent us on a 5-mile run. What an introduction. All of us started together bar the manager. After 4 miles, I was way behind everyone else. I hated long distance running, especially cross country. I was slogging away and doing my best, but it was a real effort, and suddenly I heard footsteps and regular puffs of breath coming up behind me. I turned round. It was Don Howe, who had started running 45 minutes after the rest of us. Now here he was, about to overtake me. I had to sprint flat out over the last 100 metres in order not to be beaten in a cross country by a 65-year-old man who remembered the 30s. I have to say that as prepared as I thought I was, that run was a rude awakening. The manager told me that Arsenal needed a replacement for Pat Rice at right back for at least a couple of years. Since he had retired, it was something of a problem position. This was what I wanted to hear. I knew I could fill Pat's shoes, and he was good, very good. It all meant my position in the team was secure, at least if I performed as I knew I could. Don Howe had been Bertie Mee's assistant during the double-winning season, and he was very ambitious to take Arsenal back to the top. He'd got the job after Terry Neal's unsuccessful spell in charge. And was it really unsuccessful, Terry Neal? Didn't he win an FA Cup? But anyway. Okay, Terry Neal's unsuccessful spell in charge, and he seemed determined to bring back the good times. We had some very good players, notably the great Pat Jennings in goal. Pat was as calm, cool and collected as anyone could possibly be. For a goalkeeper, he was like Buddha. I've never heard a goalkeeper called Buddha before, but there's always a first for everything. In fact, we called him God. Not for him, the shouting and finger pointing at defenders when an opponent shoots from 45 yards out. Although he was nearing the end of his career when I arrived, he was replaced by John Lukic. Some of the saves I saw him make were simply out of this world. One-on-one with a forward, he was the best. He could be looking one way, stick a foot out the other way, and save a shot he had no right to get anywhere near. No problem. Kenny Sampson was a left-back of total class. His natural ability never ceased to amaze me, and he worked hard on his game so he could make those surging runs up the left flank that were his trademark. He held off a strong challenge for his England place by another very good English fullback, Derek Statham of West Bromwich Albion, and ended up with over 80 England caps. We had Brian Talbot running the midfield, with Tommy Caton, who sadly died young, and the incomparable David O'Leary at the heart of defence. Up front was Woody was Paul Mariner, another top striker who had played for England. In addition, the talented Charlie Nicholas was brought down from Scotland to add some flair to the team going forward. On the face of it, we looked like we had a solid enough side to push for honours. Charlie had been a sensation at Celtic. As a Glasgow boy himself, he was revered on the terraces at Parkhead. He was so gifted, and fans loved him for that as much as his goal-scoring feats. The year before he came to Arsenal, he had already scored 40-odd goals for Celtic, which cemented his already huge reputation and brought the club the Scottish League title. As a reward, Charlie told me the always stingy Celtic board had offered him an increase in wages of £8 a week. We all couldn't believe it. It was such an insult. He would have loved to have continued playing for his boyhood club, but they did absolutely nothing to entice him to stay there. So off he went into the waiting arms of Don Howe and the 5 mile runs. Charlie was a catalyst for us. He was the one we looked to, the one who could turn it on, who could produce something a bit special and win us games. Charlie and Paul Mariner had the two loudest voices I have ever heard. One of them's on ESPN now, and of course Charlie's on Sky. When either of them spoke, they could break glass 100 yards away. I think he's exaggerating a bit, but I'll get the point. It wasn't that they shouted as such, they just had extremely loud voices. They were so loud you couldn't tell what they were saying half the time. If you watch Charlie on TV these days, you'll see that he's managed to tone it down a bit. That voice still goes some when he gets excited. Whenever Charlie and Paul were together, it was best to stay well clear. One day, for some reason I can't remember, we were training on the Highbury pitch. At Highbury, the dressing room had a window that looked out onto the street. I think that's the very same one that Ian Wright shouted out of after some controversy. After training, Charlie and Paul struck up a conversation by the open window. As one of them bellowed something, so the other bellowed even louder. I can't remember what the conversation was about. It could have been about the weather. So loud did their dialogue get, we all had to leave the room. Even about the weather, are you sure? Anyway, we heard later that a neighbour across the street had heard them and thought there was some kind of riot going on. They complained about the noise to the club, who had to explain that no one was hurt or killed. Either one of the two players could have found a job as a fairground barker if they hadn't been so good at football. So, I can finish the rest of it. It's not that far to go. As often happens in football, as soon as I joined Arsenal, we had to play my old club at the City Ground. It was only the second game of the season, and I wondered what kind of reception I'd get from the Forest fans. I asked myself if I could concentrate on my game. I wish I'd had a few more matches for the Gunners under my belt before this fixture. In the event, the crowd were fantastic and gave me a great reception. It was an emotional return. Perhaps too much so. We didn't perform too well and Forest won 2-0. That first season was in and out. On our day, we could beat anyone and also lose to anyone on another day. Inconsistency was our defining characteristic, to the frustration of our fans, who turned up in fantastic numbers week in, week out. I remember one Saturday we were away at Villa, who by then had won the European Cup. We hammered them 6-0. The week after that, we meekly succumbed to West Brom at home. Don Howe began tinkering, always looking for what he called the right blend. The Don, a brilliant coach, could often be uncertain when it came to picking his best team, particularly after a couple of bad results. Some of that was because he loved talking football and swapping opinions, some of which became his own. As a manager, he didn't always know when to give a player a rollicking and when to put his arm around him. Motivation of players was a bit of a mystery to him. The uncertainty was felt in other ways too. We got a good result playing poorly. When we got a good result playing poorly, Don was never sure whether to praise the result or get on our backs for the performance. Everything had to be black or white. When there were shades of grey, which was a lot of the time, Don was lost. In the end, it did him. If there was one thing George Graham brought to Arsenal, it was the certainty that he, George Graham, and he alone, knew who the best 11 were and how they should be treated. Obviously, Arsene Wenger's of the same stock. I was pleased with my own performances under Don Howe, and I was generally left out of much of the criticism the team took from the papers, which, when you are a huge club like Arsenal, dissect every error, every point dropped. I knuckled down to the harsher training methods and made sure I never slacked even for a moment. My attitude began to pay off as I put in some of the best displays of my career. I settled into the Arsenal way of doing things easily and soon felt I'd been there all my life. I only missed 3 games in 3 years. I got my first goal for my new club at the end of September in the League Cup game against Bristol Rovers, which were won 4-0. Somehow I found myself bounding forward as the great Graham Rix put in a perfect cross from the left. I continued into the 6-yard box and I nodded it in. Simple. Deborah and I, that's his wife, settled well into life in the capital. There were dinners at the best restaurants and hours spent at the most famous nightclubs. Okay, do we want to read all that? He starts talking about Duran Duran, George Best, he said that obviously George had a bit of a drinking problem. Well, that sort of goes without saying. Of course, it was drink that killed him. So back on the pitch, the season was turning into one of missed opportunities. We just couldn't put together any kind of decent run for the title. It was all the more annoying because we had good players who were playing reasonably well. Don Howe was providing dossiers on the opposition, a bit like Don Revy. I suppose if your name is Don, you have to get dossiers. That's part of the deal of being called Don. And then he said it didn't do much good. We went over every little detail again and again. By the end of these talks, we knew what our opponents had for breakfast. I suppose at Arsenal, the pressure was far greater on the manager than it had been at Forest. There, Clough was king. At Highbury, you always felt the manager's job was only lent out for a limited time. A few bad results and the boss would be out. It wasn't as cutthroat as today where the manager can be sacked only a few games into the season. But at big clubs in those days, there was always speculation concerning the manager's position if the team were faltering. And always there was the pressure to win. The effect of the detailed attention on the opposition was that we became a bit more defensive than necessary at times. This was not what Howe wanted. His instinct was to encourage us to attack at every opportunity, but we became known as a team that first of all looked to stop the opponents from playing. I don't necessarily see that's a bad thing, but clearly Anderson disagrees with me on that. It was around that time that the boring Arsenal tag became commonplace. I didn't think we were boring. How could we be boring with Charlie Nicholas in the team? But we certainly did not find it easy to play the expansive football that Don Howe craved. More often than not, we were praised for keeping clean sheets far more than we were ever for producing a great piece of skill or scoring a wonderful goal. The Don had wanted his Arsenal to play flowing, attacking football, but instead our reputation was for organisation and a good defence. And don't I miss good organisation and a good defence. But then it was looking good at the end of the season, you have to say. Clean sheets. Can't get better than that. Anyway, he continues. It's funny, but my own performances were top-notch all season in a team that was stuttering at best. The problem was that, despite the dossiers and the hard training, the manager chopped and changed the team and our system depending on what his thoughts were that week or how the opposition was set up. Often, we would have no idea of our likely formation week to week. At a club like Arsenal, the team is expected to challenge for league titles and lift a cup every season. So our league finish of 7th, Everton won the league that year, 13 points of Liverpool, and our poor showing in the cups, which might not have been a bad return at some clubs, was not enough for Arsenal. There would have to be a big improvement. And that is the end of chapter 8. Pretty good read, eh? I know I'm not reading it amazingly well, but I think it's a pretty good read. I have to... I'm not sure if I'll read all of it, but I'm certainly going to read all the Arsenal stuff. Until the next time, I'm going to say, away! And if I get more transfer news and I'm bursting at the seams to tell you, I'll do just that, right here. Okay, up the Gooners. Until the next time.